everyone, Mr. Hark here. So tonight's story is a confession from a YouTuber who went out to film one of those 24 hours in Bigfoot country challenges. He thought he was just chasing a viral moment, but his GoPro picked up something he still can't explain. Bigfoot speaking, like close enough that the mic actually catches it forming words.
Two, turn it off. Go away. Go.
And the second that happens, everything flips. Because whatever was out there wasn't just being watched, it was being hunted. Before we jump in, if you're into Bigfoot encounter stories, hit like, subscribe, and share this with that one person who swears Bigfoot isn't real. Alright, let's get into it. I need you to understand something up front, because this is the part that makes people's faces change when I tell it. I had it on camera. Not, I think I saw something on camera. Not a shaky shadow. Not a branch snapping in the dark. I mean, I had a clear, close recording of something big, too big, standing just a few feet from my GoPro, like it's thinking about them as it says them, and I destroyed it. I didn't lose it. I didn't get corrupted files. I didn't drop the card in a creek by accident. I broke it on purpose and watched the pieces disappear into black moving water. Because in that moment, with my hands shaking, I understood that the worst thing I could do was prove it. I'm telling you now because it's been years, and I still wake up and hear that voice in my head. Like somebody leaning in so you can't pretend you didn't hear. Turn it off. Go away, it said that. And then the headlights came. This happened mid-January, outside Lake Quinault, Olympic Peninsula. The side that's always green even when the rest of the state looks dead. If you've never been out there in winter, it's hard to explain. It's not just raining, it's constant. Like the air has a job, and that job is to keep everything damp. Moss grows on everything. And the forest, it doesn't feel empty. I was 35. My name's Rylan. At the time I was doing adventure YouTube full-time, or I was trying to. I'd been on that treadmill where your whole life starts to feel like it's measured in upload schedules. Mondays and Thursdays. 2 videos a week. Sponsors want a certain kind of shot. Audiences want another kind, and the algorithm punishes you if you take a breath. I wasn't famous, not like that, but I wasn't nobody either. I had a decent audience, enough that I could pay rent if I didn't screw up too much. Enough that people recognized my truck sometimes at trailheads, and I was stuck. My channel had plateaued. Views were steady but not growing. Every challenge started to feel the same. 24 hours in a cave, 24 hours in the desert, overnight in an abandoned place. The comments would be the same too. People wanting something bigger, something crazier, like I could just go pick danger off a shelf. So I started chasing a breakout video. That's what we called it. Like it was a lottery ticket if you just bought the right one. Bigfoot content was doing numbers. You'd see it in suggested videos, in shorts, in podcasts. There's this whole ecosystem of people who live in that space. Campfire stories, true encounter interviews, grainy thermal footage. I didn't believe it, not really. I believed in the fact that it got clicks, and I told myself I could make it fun, a little scary. Good production, a 24-hour survival in Bigfoot area challenge. Lake Quinault is one of those names that always comes up when people talk about sightings. It's famous enough that even if you don't believe, you know the vibe. Rainforest, remote roads, thick trees. I planned it like a content shoot. I packed gear like I was going on a brand trip. 2 cameras, batteries, a lantern that throws warm light, a stove that flares nice for night shots, a little drone, a tripod. I had a decent sleeping bag and a tarp, but my thinking was backwards. I was more worried about footage than about being wet. And I didn't bring a weapon. That's important. I didn't have a gun. I didn't even have bear spray. I had a small utility knife because I always carry one. That's it. The whole thing was supposed to be dumb and safe and dramatic in a controlled way. That's what I believed anyway. The drive-in was already a warning, and I ignored it. If you go out that way, you're on these highways that feel normal, and then you peel off onto smaller roads, and the world changes fast. Buildings thin out. Cell service goes from weak to nothing. The sky looks lower. Rain starts as this fine mist and then becomes real. I remember stopping in a little play store, gas station, the kind of spot that sells coffee, beef jerky, and chains for tires. I went in because I needed snacks and I wanted a human moment for the intro. Something like, we're stocking up. This is the last stop. The guy behind the counter looked like he'd been there forever. Older. Not unfriendly, but not chatty either. He saw my camera and he did that thing people do, where they decide if you're going to be annoying. He asked where I was headed. I said Lake Quinault. Back roads. He just nodded once, slow, and said, roads are gated out there. I said something like, yeah, I saw online some closures, but I'm gonna hike in. He looked at me for a second longer than normal. Then he said, they're gated for a reason. I remember smiling like it was part of the bit. Like, ooh, spooky. I think I even said something like, that's exactly what I want to hear. He didn't smile back. He rang me up. He told me to watch for washouts and not park where I'd get blocked in. Then he went back to whatever he was doing. I walked out feeling, I don't know, like I'd gotten a good line for the video, like the world was cooperating with my theme. That's the mindset I was in. Everything was either content or background noise. I drove deeper. The paved road turned into gravel. Gravel turned into potholes. Potholes turned into, you pick a line and hope. Trees crowded in. The forest got close. And every once in a while I'd see a spur road cutting off into even thicker timber with a gate across it. I kept going until my GPS basically gave up and my phone was just a camera. Then I saw the gate. It wasn't subtle. It was a full road closure gate across the entire road with a sign bolted to it, not one of those flimsy chains you can step over. This was a metal bar gate, heavy enough that you'd need a truck or a couple strong people to move it if it wasn't locked. There was a lock on it, and it looked wrong. It wasn't hanging the way a lock hangs when it's been there for a long time. It was too clean, too new. The chain had this scraped look on a couple links, like something had bitten it, not rust. Fresh scratches. And the ground, that's what got me. Because it had been wet and cold, and in the soft shoulder beside the gate, there were tracks. Not just one set, multiple, like people had been going around the gate. You could see where tires had left the road, gone into the muddy shoulder, and cut around through a narrow gap between brush and trees. That means somebody with a vehicle was getting past a locked gate. I stood there a minute with the rain hitting my hood and the forest just watching. That's what it felt like. Like the trees were waiting to see what I'd do. On camera, I acted like it was a fun mystery. I remember saying something like, all right, first clue. Somebody doesn't care about closures. In my head, I told myself it was locals. Workers, people who know the area better. Maybe the closure was old or temporary. Maybe the gate was there for liability. But my gut did that little twist, the one that says, this isn't nothing. I could have turned around. That's the simplest truth in all of this. I could have just backed up and left, gone to a different trailhead, filmed something else, made a safer video, but I didn't, because I'd driven all the way out there and my brain was locked into the plan. I had an audience. I had a script in my head. I had sunk cost. So I did the dumbest thing. I climbed around the gate and walked in. The first part of the hike was easy. Old logging grade, wide enough that you could drive it when it was open. The trees were thick on both sides, but the road itself was open enough that you could see a little way ahead. Everything was wet. The gravel was dark and packed down. There were puddles that looked like oil because of how the water sat on top. I had my GoPro on my chest mount and a second camera in my hand for talking shots. I was narrating, making jokes, trying to sound confident. But the forest out there, it doesn't give you that. It doesn't bounce your voice back like a canyon. It eats sound. You talk and it just disappears into damp air and moss. I remember noticing how my footsteps sounded different after a while. The road got softer, less gravel, more dirt and needles. My boots started making that suction sound when I stepped off the pack center. I saw elk sign, big prints, piles of scat, churned mud where something heavy had moved through. That wasn't weird. That area has elk. But it reminded me that I wasn't on a city trail. I was in real habitat. And then I saw something else. Not the creature. Not yet. A marker. Like a piece of bright fabric tied to a branch, low. Then another one farther in. They didn't look like official trail markers. They looked personal, like somebody's system. Like someone wanted to find their way back without putting up something obvious. I filmed it. Of course I did. I said something like, That's weird. Who's marking this road? And I kept going. The light was already starting to go gray, even though it was only afternoon. Winter out there, the daylight doesn't feel strong. It feels borrowed. Cloud cover makes it look like late evening at 2 o'clock. I found a spot where the old road widened near a creek, not right on the bank, but close enough that I could hear running water. There was a little flat area, kind of open between some big trees. It was a terrible place to hide, but it was a great place to film, so I decided it was home. I set up my tarp, pitched my small tent underneath. I put the lantern where it would cast light across the campsite and into the trees, because it looked good. I set my stove up and filmed myself boiling water. I did the whole survival thing even though I had packaged food. I joked about the Bigfoot buffet and said I'd be listening for knocks. I made it loud. I made it bright. I cringe remembering how I talked, like I owned the place, like nature was a theme park. And at some point, while I was doing that, I felt that shift. You know when you're being watched and your body knows before your brain does? Like the hairs on your arms lift under your jacket. Like you stop moving for no reason. I stopped stirring my pot. I just stood there listening. The creek was steady. Rain was light. No birds, no wind. I turned slowly and looked out into the trees, and I saw a shape. It was far enough that if you were trying to be rational, you could say it was a stump or a shadow. But it was wrong. Because it wasn't on the ground, it was higher. It was like a vertical block of darkness between trunks, not moving, just there. I remember blinking and adjusting my head like it would change what I was seeing. I raised my camera without thinking, like my hands had their own instincts. I zoomed in, and the shape moved, just a little. Not a full step, more like a lean, like something shifting its weight behind a tree. My stomach dropped. Not because Bigfoot, because whatever it was big. And it was close enough that if it wanted to be in my camp, it could be in my camp fast. I whispered, "What the?" I actually said that, like a cliche. But it was real. And then I did the stupid creator thing. I said very quietly, "Keep rolling." I watched that area for a while. Nothing else moved. The shape didn't come out again. I told myself it was my eyes, that it was a trick of light, but my body didn't buy it. I tried to act normal for the camera, but I kept glancing. I kept listening. At dusk, I had this idea, and I hate that I had it. I hate that it came from a place in my head that was still trying to win. I thought, if something is watching, maybe I can bring it closer, not with a call, not with banging, just bait. So I pulled out some meat I'd brought, just food, nothing special, and I set a little bit away from camp on a flat rock. I didn't make a huge display, but I did it on camera. I said something like, "All right, if you're out there, this is for you. I'm not trying to hurt you." I felt ridiculous saying it, but I said it anyway. I told the audience I was being respectful, that I wasn't there to hunt anything, that I was there to experience and document. In hindsight, it was like leaving a loaded trap. Not because of the meat, because I was signaling. Bright light, open camp, food set out like an offering. I was telling everything in that area exactly where I was and what I was doing. Night came early. The forest went from gray to black in what felt like minutes. My lantern became this little island of warm light, and everything beyond it was just solid dark with rain. I got in my tent, but I left the GoPro outside on a little clamp mount, aimed at the edge of camp. I had the mic open. I wanted to catch any sound. That was the plan. I remember laying there, listening to my own breathing. The tent fabric would twitch with raindrops. Every once in a while, a drop would slide down and hit the ground with a little splash. The creek was constant. It made everything else feel like background. At some point, I heard a knock. One. It could have been a branch. It could have been a tree settling. But it was clean and hard. Then a pause. Then another. 2 knocks, spaced, like, deliberate. I sat up so fast I hit my head on the tent ceiling. I froze, listening. Nothing. I told myself not to be dramatic. I told myself it was the forest. I even smiled, alone, like I was catching myself being silly. And then I heard footsteps. Heavy, slow. I felt my chest tighten. The steps weren't in my camp. They were out there, just beyond where the lantern light fell off, like someone walking along the edge of what I could see. I remember whispering, "Number no way," I reached for my headlamp and clicked it on. The light inside the tent made the fabric glow. I turned it off again because I realized it would make me visible. My hands were shaking, not a little, like full tremor. The steps stopped. There was a long pause, and then the sound moved closer. Fast, not running exactly, like 3 big strides. And then silence, like it had stopped right there, right at the edge. I remember holding my breath because I didn't want it to hear me, which is stupid, because if something that big is that close, it can hear everything. It can probably hear your heart. I heard a low exhale, like a person letting air out through their nose, but heavier. The tent fabric shifted just slightly from something moving nearby. The lantern light outside made a faint glow through the mesh, and then my GoPro picked up a sound, a voice. Not clear like a podcast, muffled, like someone speaking through a thick throat. But the shape of the words was there, the rhythm, the intent. Turn it off. I didn't move. I swear I didn't. I just sat there like my spine had turned to stone. Go away. 2 sentences, broken, clipped, like it didn't have time for anything else. My brain tried to reject it. It tried to turn it into something else. A prank, a hunter messing with me, someone with a voice changer. But it was too close, too present. I whispered barely, "What the?" And then everything changed again, because a different light hit the trees. Not my lantern, not my headlamp, headlights. At first it was just a faint brightening through the trunks, like the forest was getting lighter from behind. Then it swept, slow, and I realized it was moving. Vehicle lights, low and wide, filtering through branches. I felt this rush of confusion. Because that road was gated, I'd hiked in. How was a vehicle back there? Then I remembered the tracks around the gate. The bypass. My stomach dropped in a new way. I heard an engine, muffled, not revving, not loud, like it was kept low on purpose. Then a door shut. I heard voices, not close enough to make out words yet, but the tone was wrong. It was clipped, practical. Then came the radio chatter. That quick burst of static and a short phrase. And then I heard the dog. A working dog, not a random bark. This was a dog on a line making that eager sound, pulling forward, then stopping, sniffing, pulling again. My brain did this fast, ugly math. Something had been watching me. Something had told me to turn it off. And now there were people, men moving in with lights and a dog. It felt like I'd stepped into something I wasn't supposed to even know existed. I slid my tent zipper open just a crack and looked down. The lantern was still on. My campsite was lit up like a stage. The GoPro was there on its mount, little red light blinking. Beyond the edge of camp, between trunks, I could see flashlight beams. Several. They were moving in a pattern, not random. Sweeping, stopping, communicating. I heard one voice, clearer now. A man. Low. There. See it? Another voice answered, and I heard the mic click again. Then I saw the dog handler. I didn't see his face, just the outline. He had the leash in both hands, braced like the dog was strong. The dog pulled forward, nose down, zigzagging. And I realized, with this cold clarity, that they weren't coming to help me. They weren't coming to say, "Hey, road's closed." They were coming because my light had told them someone was in their area. I don't know if they were hunting animals, or hunting the thing that had just spoken, or hunting people who came out there. Maybe all of it. But the way they moved, it wasn't casual. They split. One pair angled straight toward my camp. Another set of beams drifted up the slope to my right, climbing like they were taking a ridgeline. Containment. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. My throat went dry again. My hands were fumbling. I did what I always do when I'm scared, and I hate this about myself. I grabbed my cameras. I popped the GoPro off its mount. My fingers were clumsy. I almost dropped it. I killed the lantern with one harsh twist, and the world went dark except for their beams. The instant I killed my light, their flashlights snapped toward my camp like I'd pointed at myself anyway, because they'd already seen it. I heard one of them say, "He's here." The dog barked once, sharp. My tent was a dark lump. My breathing sounded loud in my ears. I grabbed my pack and shoved the GoPro in. Then, without thinking, I did something I'd practiced 1,000 times for content management. I swapped SD cards. I had a spare in my pocket. I always keep spares. I pulled the GoPro card out, this tiny piece of plastic that suddenly felt like a brick of gold, and I shoved it into my boot, down the side, under my sock where it would press against my ankle. I put the spare in the GoPro. It was an instinct, like a reflex. I told myself, if they take the camera, they don't get it. I didn't even fully know what it was yet, but I knew it mattered. Then I ran. If you've never run through rainforest timber in the dark, in winter, you can't picture how fast you lose control of your own body. The ground isn't ground. It's roots, holes, wet logs, ferns, slick mud. You can't see it. You feel it with your ankles, and you hope. I had my headlamp off because I didn't want to be a glowing target. That meant I was basically moving by memory and whatever faint spill of their lights I could avoid. I heard them shout once, not a scream, just a command. Hey! Then another voice, calmer. Don't let him hit the road. Radio click. Another short burst. The dogs surged. I could hear the leash tension, the handler's boots, that scrape suction sound of feet in wet snow. And yes, there was snow. Not deep like the mountains. Patches. Wet crust and slush and shaded dips. Enough that my footprints showed. I realized that within seconds. I looked back once and saw my trail dark prints leading away from camp. Fresh. Obvious. I was leaving a map. I angled uphill because my brain went, get height, get signal. Creator brain mixed with survival brain. I thought maybe I could get a bar, call somebody, do something. I hit the slope hard. My calves burned. My breath came in loud bursts. Every step slipped. Their lights were behind me, moving like a coordinated search. One beam stayed low, following the ground. That was the dog team. Another beam swept higher, scanning trunks. Another moved sideways, drifting to cut me off. I heard the man on the ridge say something to another. Couldn't make out words, but it was like they could see me as a moving shape. I felt exposed. My heart was hammering. My hands were numb. My boot was rubbing against the SD card, and I had this insane thought, this tiny, stupid thought, don't lose it. Then the ground gave way. It wasn't a dramatic cliff. It was a slick edge on the ridge where the soil had been undercut by runoff. I stepped on what looked like solid ground, and it wasn't. It crumbled and my foot went down and my weight followed. I fell sideways. I hit something hard, rock or root, and my knee exploded with pain. White-hot. I gasped so loud it felt like I was screaming. I slid a few feet down the slope, grabbing at ferns that tore away in my hands. I stopped against the log. My chest was heaving, and their lights got closer. I heard the dog bark again, excited, like it had locked onto me. I tried to stand, and my leg buckled. Not fully, but enough to tell me I was hurt. That's when I saw the beam swing and pause. They'd found my spot. One of them said, "There." I heard the dog pulling hard, the handler grunting, boots crunching, and then something else happened. The dog made a sound I didn't recognize. Not a bark, not a whine. It was like a sudden yelp choke, and then the leash went slack in a way that made the handler stumble. I heard him curse under his breath. The lights hesitated, like the whole operation had hit an unexpected wall. And then, just beyond the beams, between me and them, a shape moved into view. Tall. It didn't step like a person trying to show off. It stepped like something that knows where it is in the dark. Like it has done this 1,000 times. It didn't roar. It didn't beat its chest. It just placed itself between me and the lights. And the way it did it, this is what stays with me. It wasn't anger. It was timing. It was purpose. Like it had waited until the exact second it needed to be seen. The hunter's beams hit it, and for a heartbeat, the forest was frozen in this insane tableau. Flashlight glare, mist, wet branches, and this massive outline, shoulders wide, head low. I remember thinking, stupidly, it's real. Someone shouted, "Jesus!" The dog whined, deep, terrified, not aggressive. Terrified. The handler pulled back. The leash scraped across wet ground. The creature didn't charge them. It bent, reached to the side, and picked up a chunk of wood. Not a boulder, not a tree trunk. A heavy rotten piece of something, probably from a downed log. Then it threw it, not at them. The wood hit the wet snow and exploded into dark fragments, spraying up like a burst. The beams flinched. Somebody recoiled. The light broke apart, and for one moment, their sight line was ruined. That one moment was enough. The creature turned, grabbed me, and hauled. I don't mean it gently picked me up. I mean a hand that was not a human hand closed on my jacket and yanked me off the log like I weighed nothing. Pain shot through my knee and I made a sound, half gasp, half cry. My brain screamed, "This is it." But it didn't hurt me, it moved me. It pulled me downhill and sideways, fast, into thicker timber where the undergrowth swallowed us. Ferns slapped my face. Branches scraped, my injured leg dragged, and I was trying to keep up, trying not to fall. I smelled it then, close, just strong. It made that low exhale again, almost like a warning to stay quiet. Behind us, the hunters were shouting now. Beams crashed through the trees. Radio chatter spiked. I heard the dog freaking out. But the creature didn't run in a straight line. It cut toward the creek. I realized what it was doing when my boots hit wet stones and the roar of water got louder. It shoved me, more like guided me, into the creek bottom where the ground was saturated and the water was moving fast and dark. My feet slipped on cobbles. I almost went down, but it kept me upright. It moved like it knew every rock. The water was cold enough that it burned through my boot soles. My legs screamed. My hands were numb and then suddenly stinging. And the dog stopped making that eager sound. It went quiet in a different way. Not found the track, quiet. I don't want to go there, quiet. I heard the handler calling, coaxing. The dog wouldn't commit. The collar tags jangled once, then went still. We moved along the creek under heavy branches where the water noise covered everything. It was like stepping into a pocket where the forest swallowed sound and scent. The creature paused under a big leaning tree that formed a kind of natural roof. It held me there, pressed back into shadow. I could see the hunters' beams through the trunks now, on the bank above. They were scanning, searching, not seen. One voice said, "Where'd he go?" Another answered, angry, "He was right there." Radio click. "He's in the creek." Then a different voice, tight, "The dog won't go." A pause. And then, quietly, like someone admitting something they didn't want to admit, "Something's here." My whole body was trembling. Cold, pain, adrenaline. My teeth were chattering and I was trying to control it so it wouldn't give us away. The creature leaned close. Not in my face, just close enough that I could feel it. Feel that heavy presence like a wall. And it spoke again. Not loud, not dramatic. Off, one word. Then, slower, "No, camera." I just stared. I couldn't make my brain do anything else. I remember nodding, like a kid. And in that pocket of shadow, with the hunter's lights moving above us, a thought landed in my head so hard it felt like it didn't come from me. If I leave with proof, they will never stop. Not just those men. Everyone. The internet. The attention. The drones. The guns. The crowds. People who want to be first. People who want to own it. People who want to kill it. And the hunters above us, they weren't surprised it existed. They were angry it had gotten involved. That told me everything. This wasn't a legend to them. It was something they'd been dealing with. Watching. Hunting. Protecting? I don't know. But it wasn't new. And I, me with my lantern and my stove and my stupid challenge, I'd walked right into the middle of it and lit up like a flare. I felt shame so sharp it made my eyes burn. I remember whispering, so quiet it barely made sound, "I'm sorry." The creature didn't react like a person would. No comfort, no nod. Just that steady presence, like it was waiting to see if I'd understand. My boot was still rubbing against the SD card. Every tiny movement reminded me it was there. And in that moment, I knew exactly what it wanted. Not because it read my mind, because it had already said it. Turn it off. Go away. No camera. So I did something I never thought I'd do. Not because I'm noble, because I was terrified and because, for the first time that night, something felt obvious. I reached down into my boot. My fingers were clumsy and numb. I had to dig under my sock and scrape the card out. When I pulled it out, the creature's head tilted slightly, like it was watching my hands. The SD card was tiny, black, a little rectangle that held everything. I held it between my thumb and forefinger and I realized I couldn't just throw it. It would survive. Somebody would find it. Those men, if they caught me, would tear my pockets apart. So I needed it gone. irreversible. I took the card and jammed it into the corner of my teeth for a second to free up my hands, then pulled out my utility knife. The blade was small. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it into the creek. The creature made a low sound, not a growl, more like disapproval, like it didn't like the knife. I whispered, "No, no, not for you." I pointed the knife at the SD card casing. I pried at it. The plastic flexed. My nails tore. I cursed under my breath. The hunters above us were closer now. I could hear their boots on wet ground. Their breathing. The radio clicks. One of them said, "Spread out." I worked faster. The knife slipped and cut my thumb. Hot pain, then warm blood and cold air. Finally, the casing cracked. A tiny snap. I peeled it open with my nails. Inside was the little chip. That's the part people don't get if they've never handled one. The memory isn't the whole card. It's a sliver inside. That sliver held the voice. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold it. I pressed it between my fingers and tried to bend it. It resisted. The creature leaned in closer. I felt its breath, warm and wet in the cold. I forced my fingers together. The chip cracked. Not dramatic, but a tiny break that you could feel more than hear. Then I did it again. And again, crushing the pieces until it was just glittering fragments in my wet palm. I looked at the creature. I don't know why. I think I wanted it to see that I understood. And I whispered, "I won't." Then I opened my hand over the creek. The water was fast and black, sliding over stones. I let the fragments fall. They vanished. No splash. Just gone. The creature watched the water. Then it looked back toward the bank where the beams were. And it moved. Not away. Toward them. Like it was going to take the heat. And that's the moment I still can't sit with. Because I realized it had been protecting itself by protecting me. It was making me useless so I wouldn't bring a storm back to its home. And once I did that, it could focus on the bigger problem, the men with lights. The hunter's beams swung, caught movement, and suddenly the forest erupted in angry voices. "There," the dog screamed. That's the only way to describe it. It made this panic sound like it wanted to crawl out of its own skin. The creature made a sharp, single bark-like sound back. Not loud, but commanding. The beams jerked. People backed up. Someone shouted again, fear this time, not confidence. And the creature moved into the brush with a speed that didn't match its size, like it was built for that ground. It gave me a chance. I didn't waste it. I crawled. That's what I did at first. Because my knee wouldn't cooperate, and because I didn't want to stand up into beams. The creek bottom was like a maze. Fallen logs, branches, slick stones. My hands went numb in the water. My cut thumb bled, and then stopped because it was cold. I moved away from the noise as fast as I could. Not straight uphill, not straight down. I just kept moving, staying low, using the water sound to cover me. Behind me, the hunters were shouting at each other. The radio chatter was constant now. I could hear the frustration, the disbelief, the way plans fall apart when something bigger than you changes the rules. I heard one man say, "Get his camera." Another shouted, "He dropped it." And my stomach tightened because I realized they must have hit my camp after I ran. They must have grabbed my GoPro or found it in my pack if I'd left it. But I'd swapped the card. So if they got it, it would be empty of the real thing. That was the only small advantage I had. I limped along the creek until my legs felt like rubber. Every step sent pain through my knee. It wasn't just sore. It felt unstable. Like it could give out any second. At some point I made it to a section where the creek widened and slowed a little, braided around gravel bars. I tried to cross to the other side because the bank I was on was too exposed. My foot slipped on a rock and I went down hard. The cold water hit my chest and stole my breath. My camera gear and my pack shifted and pulled me sideways. I struggled, splashing, which felt like the loudest thing in the world. I crawled out, soaked. I realized then I was at real risk of hypothermia. I mean, I could lose coordination, get stupid, make one wrong move, and be done. Alone in wet cold. And the hunters were still behind me. So I did the only thing I could. I kept moving. I tried to find the old road. I told myself if I could get back to it, I could follow it out. Even if it was gated, it led somewhere. But everything looked the same in the dark. Trees, black. I turned my headlamp on for a few seconds at a time, shielding it with my hand, just enough to see where my next step was. Every time I did, I felt exposed. I kept limping until I found a faint depression in the ground that looked like an old track. Muddy, packed, less undergrowth. I followed it like a lifeline. My knee was swelling. I could feel it inside my pants, tight. Every time I put weight on it, it felt like a knife. I remember thinking about stupid things. Like how my phone battery was probably dying in the cold. Like how I'd never shown my audience what it feels like to be truly lost. Like how my mom would be getting up in the morning and she'd have no idea. Then I saw a dim light through trees. For a second, my heart jumped because I thought it was their vehicle. But it was too steady, too small. It was my lantern. My camp was still glowing faintly like a dying ember. And now, it wasn't empty. I saw beams moving around it. I saw silhouettes. They were in my camp. I crouched behind a tree and watched, shaking. My whole body hurt. My clothes were soaked. My breath sounded loud. One of the men held my GoPro up. He shook it like it owed him something. Another rummaged through my tent. A third stood with the dog leashed tight, the dog still uneasy, head low. I heard one of them say, "Where's the card?" Another answered, "It's in here, has to be." The first voice, angrier now, said, "He swapped it. He's filming us." Then, kill the light. Someone stomped my lantern. Darkness swallowed the camp. And then I heard the most terrifying thing of the whole night. One man said, calm as ordering coffee, "He's not getting out with it." Another voice replied, "We got him boxed." Bridge teams up there. They weren't talking about calling authorities. They weren't talking about escorting me out. They were talking about closing the loop. They would hurt me. Maybe they'd call it an accident, a fall, a lost hiker, a guy who ignored a gate and got what he deserved. Nobody would know the difference. I backed away from my camp as silently as I could and angled toward where I remembered the road being. I couldn't go up to the ridge because they were there. So I did what the forest forces you to do when you're scared. I went sideways. Through thicker timber, over rotten logs. Behind me, I heard them moving again. They'd realized I wasn't in camp. Beams started searching. The dog pulled, sniffing. And then, this still feels unreal to say, I heard the creature again, out there, closer to them than to me. Not speaking this time. Just movement. Branches snapping, heavy steps, then that sharp, bark-like sound. The hunters' voices changed. They weren't just angry now. They were tense, focused, like they were dealing with something dangerous and familiar. One of them said, "There, don't shoot unless you got it." Another snapped, "Keep the dog back." They weren't afraid of the dog getting hurt by me. They were afraid of the dog getting hurt by whatever was out there. I used that distraction. I limped harder. I forced my leg to do what it didn't want to do. I found the road. It was an old logging road, muddy and rutted, but it was a line, a direction. I followed it, stumbling, half running, half falling. I kept going. Hours passed. At some point, the road started to rise, and then it leveled, and then I saw something that made me almost cry. A reflective sign. Not a trail marker. A real road sign, reflective like it was meant for cars. I stumbled to it and put my hand on it like it could hold me up. It had numbers and letters. Forest road designation. Mud splattered. I followed that road until the trees thinned just enough that the sky looked lighter. Dawn, or close to it. That winter gray that isn't bright but tells you the night is ending. I heard a vehicle in the distance. Not their engine. A different sound. More normal. A car on a maintained road. I stood there, swaying, and listened until I heard it again. Then I pushed myself forward, limping, waving my arms like an idiot, even though nobody could see me yet. When I reached the maintained road, my knee was huge now. My clothes were soaked and stiff with cold. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I looked back at the trees. I saw nothing, just wet forest. Dark trunks, rain. A car came around the bend, a small sedan, and the driver slowed the second they saw me. I must have looked wrecked, muddy, soaked, limping, face scratched up like I'd been dragged through brush. They cracked the window and asked if I was okay, and I tried to answer, but nothing came out at first. I finally got out. "I need help. I got hurt." They hesitated, smart, and then popped the passenger door and told me to get in. When the heater hit my wet clothes, it hurt at first, like needles, and then it turned into the best feeling I've ever had. The driver asked what happened, and I just stared at the dashboard, trying to pick a version of the truth that wouldn't get me laughed at or make me sound like a threat. You can't tell a stranger. I climbed past a tampered gate, got chased by organized guys with radios and a dog, and a talking Sasquatch pulled me into a creek to lose them. So I said, I got lost. I fell. I think there were people out there. The driver's face tightened like they understood more than they wanted to, and they didn't press. They just drove. I ended up at a clinic, then a bigger place. My knee was a mess sprain, ligament strain, whatever it was, and my hands were cut up. I needed stitches in my thumb from slicing it open in the cold. The staff asked normal questions, how long I'd been out, whether I hit my head, whether I'd been drinking. Then a different person came in uniform, calm voice, and asked different questions, where I parked, what road, what gate, if I saw anyone. I told him pieces. I told him about the gate being messed with, headlights in the trees, men moving like a team, a dog on a line. His expression didn't do the sure buddy thing. It was worse. It was like, yeah, that tracks. He asked if they threatened me. I said no, that was a lie. I heard enough. I just couldn't make myself say it out loud in a hospital room, like it would make it real enough to follow me home. He warned me not to go back, talked closures and winter hazards, said they'd look into it, and left. After that, it was just me, my gear, and my GoPro sitting there like a dumb little object that had almost gotten me killed. The spare card was still inside, empty of what mattered, and I felt this sick relief because proof suddenly felt like blood. I went home, told my audience I'd gotten hurt on a winter shoot, took some time off, and didn't upload anything. A few days later, I got an email from a throwaway address, no subject line, one sentence. You were told to go away. I deleted it, but it didn't matter. I could still hear the words in my head, and I could still see that afternoon clip on my laptop, the dark shape behind a trunk, just blurry enough to leave room for denial. I realized I could have hinted, teased, fed the machine, and people would have swarmed that place with drones and guns and lights, and the men I ran from would have been waiting. So I shut the computer and sat there in silence, because what stuck with me wasn't just the creature. It was the human part, the coordination, the calm cruelty, the way proof attracts the worst kind of attention. And the only reason I got out at all is because I made myself worthless to everyone who wanted that footage. I erased it.